It's going to be hard for the Ninja 500 to replicate the massive hype of the Ninja 400. First, let's take a guess at the Ninja 500's engine. And while we're at it, see if parts from the Psy 450 can be used to fix it up. First, this clutch cover gasket is exactly the same as the Ninja 400 and Psy 450. So that means we have an interchangeable part. Now let's look at the clutch. The clutch is still a slipper clutch. The clutch brand is FCC from Japan. Everyone knows the Ninja 400 loves to burn clutch plates. And these clutch plates on the Ninja 500 look identical to the Ninja 400's. I suspect they might have just increased the spring rate. Taking off the clutch basket, watch out for this gear. You must pay attention to the orientation of the oil pump drive gear. A lot of Ninja 400 engines end up being repaired because of this. Some owners replace the clutch themselves and put this gear in backwards. As a result, it fails to drive the oil pump. And then the engine gets completely seized. Let's look at its needle roller bearing. It uses a Japanese NTN bearing. The actual displacement of the Ninja 500 is 451 cubic centimeters. Right, it's not actually a full 500 cubic centimeters. It seems like many manufacturers nowadays name their models without basing it on the actual displacement anymore. The Ninja 400 and Ninja 500 share the same cylinder bore, both being 70 millimeters. So where does the difference in displacement come from? It's because the crankshaft stroke has been lengthened. As for its power characteristics, it will lean more toward improving low to mid-range torque. The camshaft caps show no signs of wear. Let's take a look at the camshafts. The camshafts are made of ductile iron. On the Ninja 400, they were forged before 2023, but switched to cast iron after that. The Ninja 500 went straight to cast iron right from the start. Forged parts are definitely more expensive, so we'd still prefer forged ones. The manufacturer probably figured this material is plenty for your needs. After all, ductile iron actually has slightly better wear resistance. Forged ones just offer higher strength. Anyway, if it were up to me, I'd want forged. What do you guys think? Now let's check out the valves. Looking at them like this, the valves look fine. Next, let's look at the camshaft journals. There are obvious signs of wear here. This engine suffered from improper maintenance, which is why it needs a complete teardown. Now let's look at the cylinder. The cylinder block uses an electroplated ceramic coating. Because it ran low on oil, the score marks are quite noticeable. However, the crosshatch honing marks still look fairly continuous. So you could technically get away with reusing this cylinder. But if you're chasing perfection, you'd replace it. When marks are this obvious, you should judge its condition based on the honing marks. Let's take a look at the pistons. The pistons can also still be used. The factory pistons are high silicon aluminum pistons. The top piston is usable, but the bottom piston has some pretty heavy scuffing on it. The owner's stance is, if it runs, so we'll just reuse it. It definitely won't cause any abnormal knocking noises. The skirt area where the piston takes the most load is right here. And there's no major damage here. Just 2 scratches that won't stop the owner from installing it. And indeed, there were no weird noises, so my assessment was correct. The top of this piston is also treated with a micro-arc oxidation process. The piston rings are from Riken. The owner had previously torn this engine apart themselves and sent it to me loosely put back together to finish the repair. Of these 2 connecting rods, one is good. and one is bad. The discolored one is the one that spun a bearing. And the non-discolored one? As you can see, the bearing shell is shot too. This bearing shell needs to be replaced as well. It's interchangeable with the Ninja 400, and can also be used on the Sai 450. The bearing shells are made by Daito Japan. The owner doesn't want to spend too much money fixing this engine. So I need to check if the Sai 450 parts can be bolted right on. Because as everyone knows, the Sai 450 is a clone of the Ninja 400. A lot of its parts are completely interchangeable with the Ninja 400. Whenever Ninja 400 owners come to me for engine repairs and want to save cash, we use Sai 450 parts directly. It works perfectly fine. For instance, if the crankshaft is ruined, you can swap in the entire crankshaft assembly from the Sai 450. Just remember to use them together. You can't use just the crank or just the rods on their own. Mix-matching individual parts won't work, but swapping the whole assembly is no problem. Don't ask why. Just do it. The crankshaft stroke on the Sai 450 is longer, so you might worry if the pistons will pop out past the cylinder deck. Actually, they won't, because the Sai 450 connecting rods are shorter. Therefore, the piston's top dead center, TDC, remains unchanged. Things like the crankcase gaskets or the oil strainer I just pulled out. If you really can't source the OEM ones, you can use Sai 450 parts. All the rubber seals and gaskets can use Sai 450 components. Thank goodness for clones, thank goodness for clones. The price of a used Ninja 400 isn't very high anymore. If we had to bill based on genuine Kawasaki parts pricing, some people probably wouldn't even bother fixing it. When the budget is tight, the mechanic has to take a cut on profit too. But if we don't fix it, we don't make a single penny, right? Let's check the balancer shaft. This bearing is half worn, so it needs to be replaced. As for the main bearings, they are in pretty mediocre shape too. Let's just replace them all. The brand of the main bearings is also Daito Japan. Let's just skip past the transmission shafts. They look perfectly fine. If you're enjoying the video, please give it a thumbs up. Let's verify if the balancer shaft itself has issues, since the bearing shell was half destroyed earlier. Looking at it now, the balancer shaft is unharmed. The balancer shaft is forged. Now let's check the crankshaft. The rod journal for cylinder 2 is deeply scored here, as you can see. The crankshaft is forged alloy steel as well. The other journals are completely fine. Man, what a shame. A new crank like this isn't cheap. Once a crankshaft gets scored like this, it's pretty much toast. Let's talk about the maintenance specs for this engine. For oil viscosity, choose 10W40. Options like Shell Advance Ultra will work perfectly fine. They use a natural gas-based oil technology. The oil capacity is 2 liters. The alternator setup on the Ninja 500 is identical to the post-2023 Ninja 400. If I grab a balancer shaft from the Sai 450, it drops perfectly into the Ninja 500's bottom case. And if I take its camshafts, they also fit perfectly onto the Sai 450 cylinder head. But the crankshaft is a different story, unfortunately. Its main journals are thicker than both the Sai 450 and Ninja 400. So for this crankshaft, we'll just have to source a proper used replacement part. Another workaround is to use the crankcase halves from a Sai 450 or Ninja 400. That would work too. Alright, ultrasonic cleaning is all done. In the end, we went ahead and bought used salvage parts. The Legend 500 case has been ultrasonically cleaned. Next, we're getting it ready for assembly. Unfortunately, the crankshaft from the 450 can't be used. If you were to use the 450's crankshaft, you'd even have to swap the crankcase too. But parts like the piston rings, and the gudgeon pin can still be reused. This particular engine had seized. For the teardown footage, check out the previous video. Apply assembly lube to the bearing shells. As things stand right now, the 450 from a couple of years back is actually the best option for repairing a Ninja 400. After all, it's basically built off the Ninja 400 platform. You could say Qianjiang anticipated Kawasaki's move, and that's fair to say too. Qianjiang first took the Ninja 400, kept the bore the same, and increased the stroke to bring the displacement up to 450. That's how the 450 came about, and Kawasaki's own 500 is also based on the Kawasaki 400. Keeping the bore the same and increasing the stroke to bring the displacement up to 450. Doesn't it kind of sound like Legend copied Qianjiang's approach? Actually, you can't really put it that way. A manufacturer boring out its own engine to increase displacement is a pretty normal thing. Take Kawasaki, for example. That earlier twin-cylinder 250 Ninja also has a 300 cubic centimeters version. Same principle. Keeping the bore unchanged and increasing the stroke to achieve the bump in displacement. This time, we really do have to thank Qianjiang. Look at the full engine gasket set. Just use the one made for the 450. A full set costs under 200. If you were to install the genuine Ninja 500 set instead, first of all, you'd have to wait over a month just to order it. And as for the price, for that money you could buy 6 Qianjiang sets. You can do the math yourselves. The old crankcase was also ultrasonically cleaned. If you want to talk about rough finishing, Kawasaki really is pretty rough these days. Look at these casting marks inside the crankcase. They didn't even bother cleaning them up. That said, it doesn't necessarily affect usability. It's just a bit rough on the eyes. On some engines, these hidden casting lines can show through on the surface. And that leads to some owners thinking their case is actually cracked. When people ask me about it, I just give them a detailed explanation. Now, install the stator. And for the stator cover gasket, I'm also using the Qianjiang one. Qianjiang's gaskets are actually pretty good quality. Credit where it's due. It's made from a steel reinforced material and can be reused. But on the Ninja 400 and 500, once you open it up, it has to be replaced, because the clutch plates are a wear item. So if you ever replace the clutch plates down the line, on a Ninja 400 or 500, the clutch cover gasket has to be replaced as well. If the genuine part is too pricey, just get the 450 version, it's much cheaper. See what I mean? This video's turned into a money-saving guide again, hasn't it? Qianjiang has cloned a huge number of engines. And this is just one of them. Down the line, Qianjiang will clone other engines too. And at that point, those engines will get interchangeable parts as well. So really, from that angle, we still have to thank Qianjiang. At the very least, for the pricey parts on imported bikes, you now have a replacement option. For example, regular viewers of my channel know that a Honda 650 ignition coil used to cost $400 or $500. Then once the 800 came out a couple of years ago, its ignition coil, built to genuine OEM standard, could be used directly on the Honda 650, but only cost $40 or $50. Just look at that price gap. There's also the camshaft. A mechanic I know once snapped a camshaft and swapped in a 380 camshaft, or the 3602S camshaft. That only runs a few hundred yuan. whereas the Honda one is close to 2,000. That's a clear money saver, isn't it? There's also the Honda 650 crankshaft. An earlier model that never even made it to production had a crankshaft identical to it, and cheaper too. So, a lot of Honda 650 owners wants their bearing shell score, and their repair budget is tight. Just go with this crankshaft instead. Alright, as I mentioned before, maintaining this engine takes about 2 bottles of oil. Honestly, this engine is pretty easy to look after, even if you skip Shell's premium fully synthetic oils. Shell's entry-level oil is more than enough, as long as you're not riding it super aggressively. Since you've made it this far, if you're enjoying the video, drop a like. Alright, install the cylinder head cover, torque it down properly, and then check the compression. As long as the compression is normal, it'll start up no problem, guaranteed. Alright, 14 kilograms compression, no issues. Let's check the compression on cylinder 1 as well. Good, that one also reached 14 kilograms. All done, wrapping up here. Thanks for watching.